상대를 동의기 표현시도 보시고
So please look at chapter 8. Try to prepare the student. And here at the end of chapter 8, where the text talks about the benefits of emptiness, the benefits of understanding emptiness. So in English it is verse 196. Correct perception leads to the supreme state, etc. Does anyone have this table?
돈이기다 팬도가지 있네. 아니 shigyapa 송셰주가 어디서 데스 초동적 시험을 해서 털때 강라 데스 와라 데스 되게.
So Geshe-la would like to speak about here in particular the benefits of emptiness and kind of organize it, kind of clarify it with respect to the earlier verses that preceded this particular one in the 400 in the text, the 400 verses.
다들 동접셔 소리도 양다보다 동반이기 때문에 아니 지다오신도 통나 또 무슨도 통나 통을 거는다 거나 다 되잖아. 내 초타바다 되지부터 그래. 진짜 뭐 준비 뭐래요? 아니 동반이 다 펴봐다. 사비권 중세 통나세다 펴봐다 사비권. 아니 통나 아니 디버 시부지 다에 손으로 또 주나. 아니 손 시부 사에 손 디지 거네. 아니 대주고 탑도 그랬어.
Now here with regard to this particular verse 196, so it's basically saying that through correct perception or through correctly seeing, as it says in the Tibetan, correct perception, correctly seeing, so either perceiving emptiness directly or meditating on emptiness, eventually it leads to the supreme state, which refers to liberation or enlightenment. But even before that, if one has only some perception, as it says in English, a little seeing or some perception here, even that on its own, so by listening to the teachings on emptiness, by reflecting upon them, not only does one attain eventually liberation or enlightenment, but one also purifies a lot of negativities, one accumulates great virtue, and then as a result of that is reborn in one of the higher states, in the more fortunate states.
돈이 중세지지 다 바이 퇴버이네. 아니 손 시부사 디바다스 대대송 디기토네 네 삼조스 때 대도제 송에디 디로와 다디지 뒤전에 디고 다이어트 기지 쉐바이네 아니 돈이다 저주선을 타가 요 말이스 신다 딜이 타비 탑신다 요 말이스 지다 디고 다이어트를 먹고요 디 경제 가르스나 아니 디고 탐지기 자와 딘진을 투데요레 딘진다 디고 탐지 딘진다 라진진 송제지 토네 니게 고아로 디지 뒤전에 디기 카데 무슨 초딩이 딘진이 카데 무슨 초딩이 돈이다 돈이도 돈인기다 미비다 시랍다 아니 라진진다 다 무슨 카데 차딩이 라는 신체 무슨 주의 있어 전인지다는 지금와 진짜 디니를 하고 말했습니다.
So here when it says in the second line, some perception. So some perception here means having listened to some degree, having listened a little, having contemplated a little about emptiness, well, that leads to good transmigrations, in other words, higher rebirth. And from the point of view of purifying negativities, there are different methods in general, methods for purifying negative karma. However, it is explained that there's no better method for purifying negativities or for purifying negative karma other than reflecting upon emptiness or meditating on bodhicitta. So the reason for that is that all our misbehavior, all our negative actions, our harmful actions, they arise from the misperception of reality, of the awareness that grasps at true existence. And they arise from our self-centered attitude. So those two, the self-grasping mind and the self-centered attitude, those two are the main causes for our negative actions. And so therefore, applying the opposing forces to those two causes serves as a powerful antidote to the non-virtues. So the wisdom realizing emptiness is a powerful force against the mind that grasps at true existence. Whereas bodhicitta, or love, compassion, the kind of practices that pertain to the method, the loving kind of practices, or they're associated with love, compassion, they serve as an antidote to the self-centered attitude by cherishing others. So instead of cherishing oneself, cherishing others.
저전이 사모도 때리 차네 아니 코디 장두산에 som사에 계제의 시디산에 다디 저저된 등이 되니나 아니 상나다 셰고.
So for instance, the explanation that by reciting mantras one purifies negativities and accumulates virtue, well the reason for that, one accumulates merit, well the reason for that is that those mantras actually express those two ideas, those two concepts, so emptiness as well as bodhicitta. And while one recites those, one should be reflecting upon those two. So therefore, the reason for these mantras being beneficial is that they basically reflect, that they set forth or reveal the realization of emptiness as well as bodhicitta. So one doesn't even need to mention it's of course beneficial by just reflecting upon those two, that one is able to, or by just reflecting on those two, one is able to purify negativities and accumulate merit. Likewise, engaging in prostrations directed at the Buddha or making offerings to the Buddha, to the Buddhas. Again, why is this explained to be beneficial from the point of view of purifying negativities or purifying negative karma and accumulating virtue? Well, because the Buddha is considered to be a precious object of prostration, object of offering, because the Buddha has finalized the realization of emptiness as well as bodhicitta.
디닝이 나면 답답하고 중간이나 뭐 시즌이 되고 있다니스. 좀 가르스나 선지 링세 자신을 차야 돼요. 시리 버를 심을 때 자신을 차버리스. 이내 뭐 선지 링세를 그거는 이게 좀 말했어. 이 담고 좀 시즌이 답이스. 좀 내게 다가라 그랬어. 걔는 집어했어. 뒤수.
So from the point of view of stupas, for instance, we regard stupas as very precious objects with respect to one's practice. And the reason for the preciousness of stupas is because they contain relics. In general, they contain relics of the Buddha, which are considered to be precious. And in one of the sutras, there is a conversation between the Buddha and Indra. So the Buddha asked Indra, if you had to choose between all the relics of all the Buddhas and a text on the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, which one would you choose? And Indra responded, I would choose the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And the reason for this response was that he said, those relics, they are special, they are precious because of the perfection of wisdom, because of the sutras and then the following practice of the perfection of wisdom, which is why he considered these sutras to be more precious. And he's saying, I do not disrespect the relics. Indra said that he didn't disrespect the relics, but nonetheless, if he had to choose, he would choose the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras over the relics. So if one feels the need to purify non-virtue, to purify negative karma, one should meditate on emptiness. And if one doesn't understand emptiness, then one should first read the scriptures, studies the scriptures that set forth emptiness. And then if one feels bored doing this, if one feels bored studying the scriptures, one should just recite them. And if even that is not an option, well, then one can engage in prostrations or in reciting mantras. But it's important that initially one should not ignore the most important practice, the most beneficial or effective practice when it comes to purifying negativity. So not to engage in a kind of inferior, in relation to a superior practice, in an inferior practice, if there's something superior from the point of view of purifying negativities.
제산타 텐지기 소놈 사야다 티베타에 기지시 베이나 돈이 고메디 초레디 이네 인지미지 돈이 공고에 기지도 말해 돈이 먹었네 소놈 사야 요래 소놈 사야 고 먹고요 티베타에 탑고 먹고요.
However, in order to accumulate merit and in order to purify negative karma, is it absolutely necessary to meditate on emptiness? The answer is no. Because there are other methods to accumulate merit. There are other methods in order to purify negativity. So there are many methods, many doors or entryways from the point of view of different kind of methods that accomplish those two, purification and accumulation.
제디 이네 타바다 탄지체모 토웨키지 셰바이나 유몽사메 스웨키지 셰바이나 타디 돈이 관한다 주주르마도 탑신 요마 돈이 파샤지 신다 탑시바 요마 탑지 요마.
However, from the point of view of achieving or attaining liberation or enlightenment, then the only method, the only way to do this is to depend upon emptiness. So without meditating on emptiness, one is unable to irrevocably eliminate the afflictions, and in that way attain one of those two states. So if instead one tries to apply other methods without engaging in the realization of emptiness, one will not attain either of those states. So the reason for that is explained in the following verse.
rabche shulaga sunjanga chu rabche chushi bi tadir.
So verse 350, the awareness that is the seed of existence, etc.
and shine ni sibi sabe ni kato gures sidujan ta siba di zawane chegu na tungi di zawane ta na ta di dame motole gires watisu.
So here it says the awareness that is the seat of existence as object, as its sphere of activity. So Geshe-la explained that this means that the root of existence, or the root of samsara, is the mind that perceives true existence. So the awareness that perceives true or inherent existence, that is the root. And what does it, the root of samsaric existence, and what does it focus on? It focuses on its objects. So the objects being visual form, sound, and so forth. So these objects, when their selflessness is seen, so the third line, when selflessness is seen in objects, so instead of perceiving true existence, one understands the lack of true existence. In other words, the selflessness of these objects, then the seeds of existence, the seed of existence is destroyed. The seed of samsara is destroyed.
Jada sunju songa rabche da tuba deki trasar yule buwa chi shintus.
So why is it that we have to realize the lack of inherent existence in order to overcome samsara? Well, the reason for this is that we have to overcome the afflictions. And the afflictions, their root, the root is the misperception of reality, is the ignorance that perceives true existence. And this is explained in verse 135, which is in the 6th chapter, where the first line reads, as the tactile sense pervades the body, and so forth. So this verse was previously explained, or was explained in the morning, with regard to this explanation that was given, was that every affliction has its own kind of antidote, an antidote which reduces that particular affliction. For instance, when you have anger, you apply the antidote of love and compassion. Whereas if there is attachment, one applies the antidote of seeing the negativity or the ugliness of a particular object. However, in order to overcome, that is to eliminate all the afflictions, then there's only one method or one antidote, which is the wisdom realizing
Jota, Yuangi, the Chanacha, Casa Honduke, the Dutaneta, Tenzindi, Zibajiala, Tigala, Chimichi, and the Yavori to Jas, the Muntiji, Diwangi, and the Chanake, the Zibopra Association, the Mundi correction latter.
Now, with respect to the afflictions, so the afflictions are being rooted in the misperception of reality. In other words, the confusion or the misperception, ignorance of reality, perceiving inherent existence. Well, that has been explained by Chandrakirti when he says that by designating inherent existence onto phenomena, then one then perceives these phenomena after perceiving them or misperceiving them to exist inherently, one then perceives them to be in and of themselves good or bad, positive or negative, which is due to the inappropriate attitude that arises after the misperception of reality, which then gives or designates a positiveness or negativeness onto phenomena. And then that in turn gives rise to the different afflictions, gives rise to attachment, anger, and so forth. So this is similar, or this is exemplified by the analogy of the wall, as Ishla explained some earlier time, with respect to first there's the wall of perceiving true existence. So true existence is it's something that creates a wall. It's an awareness that creates a wall of misperception. And then the inappropriate attitude draws pictures of positiveness and negativeness onto the wall. So that compares to the inappropriate attitude. And then from that sense of positiveness or negative or being good and bad, well, from that then arise the other afflictions. That is attachment, anger, etc.
Chizanta di issue de la chikora nangla de careers na tingun da ta me de ba chuba jushin tingun da dance ni sungo tingun da ta me de ba bari bari da chundes di de da ya tingun da den ke bas de issue be di song du san de shi jön du tingun da chungden du zhong ji ni de sha chi de sha da ta cha da ya tingun da den ke de ni cha da chi ni cha da ni yo res de issue be chu sung.
And then his Holiness also gave the explanation of there being two types of ignorance. Two types. One serves as the cause of the different types of afflictions, and one is described as not being separate from these different kinds of afflictions. So in the sense of being associated with them, being arising together with them. So one type of ignorance gives rise to attachment, anger, etc. And the other type arises together with them as being associated with these afflictions. So His Holiness explained this morning, that there are these two types of afflictions, two types of ignorance, which differ from the point of view of coarseness and subtlety.
Chingibachi shake to say Mondo Sayam this and Jajo Kuju, so say Sirius, the Chivarua. That the Digi Jajo Kuju Tong the Hindi, Trevor Tong the Vara, that I get a Jew to Jajuna, and a catcher Kuju Trevor Tong the Digi Tony, that Chunsha Bagawa Senator to Kondo di, that the moon Tebadici, Rapadici.
Explained earlier, when he cited one of the scientists who explained that when we get angry, what the awareness of anger perceives in that moment is 90% a projection of what's actually there. So that means that even if there's something negative that gives rise to the anger, the negativity only makes up 10%. 90% are projection from the point of view of exaggerating the negativity of that object. So that negativity or that kind of sense of feeling upset or getting angry in that moment, well, that arises from ignorance.
자주 주 통대디 고주디다 좋다 버체 자주 주디다 좋다 보면 이거 지고 지로 지장잖아.
So we have to say when this awareness of anger arises and it perceives some negativity, well, from the point of view of those 10%, they're in accordance with reality. So we have to say that from the point of view of those 10%, the mind is correct. Whereas from the point of view of the 90%, it is incorrect. So we actually get less saying, we actually have to kind of say that. So actually these 10% are what we perceive when we're not angry. So it's actually at the time of the anger not being there, what we perceive, that negativity that we perceive without the anger, that makes up the 10%.
딱 전기 아니 제주 계좌 뭐 이거지. 그런 거면 제주 두자이 뭐 통인데 해제디 된진가 시다니가 맨저스 땅에서 놓지다. 된진이 시다 인스타디 제주 디 라고는 주었다. 진비 토네 네 마가와 진대기로 왔다 어디. 다들 주대 제주 고주디 딱 디모는 때버리 조사로 다 제제 주사를 어디 그거 오면도 양다고 봐. 전주에서는 딜레이를 오늘 이거 증거디 다 요로. 지금 이제 제제 주를 오늘 이거 증거 토를 다 막아와 지금 물어다. 대차는 야가 이거 통도이는 데스 카보도 대차는 다 제제 주 거의 보면은 세도 이동하여나 이제 제제 주를 오늘 이동화 증거도 뒤다 증den기에 대차를 되는지. 다 대차이 된지 있는 제자들이 차라니 수에 참모디 제주 주디가가 그게 용 차단기에 요거지.
So Geshe-la basically said, so earlier on he explained that there are two types of afflictions, coarser ones and subtler ones. There's a difference of coarseness and subtlety. So here with respect to the misperception, giving rise to different afflictions. So for example, taking the anger, there is a type of anger which projects 90%. It projects 90%, it projects what's actually there. So that's a coarser type. Whereas you have another type which is subtler, where you only have 10%. You perceive a negativity of 10%, which according to the lowest philosophical systems would be in accordance with reality. They would actually exist that way, and the awareness that perceives those 10% of negativity would be a correct awareness or non-mistaken. On the other hand, from the point of view of the Prasangika, Madhyamika Prasangika, they would say that even this kind of mind of feeling upset in that moment or experiencing dislike with regard to those 10% of negativity, even that mind is an affliction because it is associated with the misperception of reality. It perceives the object as from its own side being negative. So the object seems to be in and of itself negative, and therefore this particular awareness that is upset with the situation is associated with the misperception of reality, and thus a mistaken mind, thus a simpler type of affliction. So, talking about it from a coarser point of view, so there's a sense that the phenomenon that one perceives holds a negativity of 10% or 20% or 30%, etc. But it's really difficult to say how much the degree of negativity is. How can you really decide the degree of negativity? So then from there, the next point, the next kind of reasoning that arises is, well then, isn't there attachment that focuses on the Buddha? So how great is the negativity one sees? How great is the percentage, like 10%, 20%? How great is the percentage of negativity one perceives? Because of course, from a Buddhist point of view, a Buddha is someone who's totally free from any kind of negativity. So how much negativity can one actually project onto a Buddha, a being who's totally free from any shortcomings? So as Holness earlier said, that attachment may arise, attachment directed or focusing on a Buddha, but that this attachment is much simpler. So from a course point of view, we usually talk about the afflictions arising in dependence on contaminated phenomena. So in other words, one's afflictions, they focus on contaminated phenomena, and they do not focus on attachment, on liberation or enlightenment or a Buddha. So there's the sense that pure objects, they don't actually give rise, pure objects such as liberation, etc., they do not give rise to those afflictions. But then from a subtler point of view, we have to say that even with regard to these subtler types of objects, with regard to pure types of objects, such as the Buddha, liberation, etc., that these kind of afflictions, or subtler types of afflictions, can arise. So this was the explanation that was earlier given. So with regard to various types of objects, attachment may arise. So without talking about the subtler, without giving subtler types of explanations, so from a Prasangika point of view, one needs to talk about the fact that one should become angry, one should be resentful, one should not be content and reduce one's attachment, but one should have attachment or one should have desire. That explanation arises. So Holness is saying one should have desire, one should not be content. So you may be confused with Gila saying that. So you shouldn't be patient. So, therefore, what His Holiness is saying is that we should not be content, we should be greedy, we should have desire, we should have attachment, etc. But we don't know, and on the other hand, His Holiness says, or the teachings tell us, well, we should have less desire, we should be content, we should be less greedy, we should have less attachment, etc. So here what His Holiness means, or what this means here, is that we just don't know, we are unable to differentiate the right object, what we should have desire for, and what we should be content with. So usually we choose very limited objects. We choose the objects of the senses, such as visual form, shapes, sounds, and so forth. So we are not content with them, but rather have desire and attachment towards them. Whereas Geshe-la is saying we should aim higher. We should not aim for those limited objects, but rather wish for liberation. Not be content with the state we're in right now, but rather have desire for liberation or enlightenment to benefit all sentient beings. That's the kind of desire we should generate and not be content with our situation right now.
That didn't seem very severe any control of this. Only continue over this in the Jesedi, Manorochi. Manzuki, Susugi, that Navishun Shiva in the Toma Meba, Susu Pama Jeding, Pama Nien Jeding, did a condosa. Susu making a woman did a condoking Yama, continue Yama. The Kundiki did that Palade or Kadine, you want to get Tateba to never care that. Did that, turn that, didn't cut the channel column. That condition and one. That was a condition that she got several columns. Katsin and the beer just a sister. This is that was a consumer jetty.
So likewise, as it's also explained that we should not be patient. We should not be patient. We should be angry. We should have resentment. But what should we be angry with? What should we have resentment towards? Well, usually we are unable to find the right kind of object. We are unable to choose the right object to be resentful towards. So in general, we have resentment or we are angry with those sentient beings who since beginning of time have been our mothers and fathers. Those are the ones we are impatient with. These are the ones we get angry with. But we don't get angry and resentful towards our real enemy. So our real enemy, as His Holiness explained, is our afflictions, our different types of afflictive emotions. Those are the ones we should go against. Those are the ones we should oppose. We should have resentment towards those. But instead, we're very patient with them. We're very patient with them. There's a sense that they benefit us. We even take refuge in our own afflictions, instead of having anger and resentment with regard to those afflictions.
That doesn't really simply change this. Kalonai, the Sunga, the Nilia simply cheddar shas and Godu. That's true, maybe. Never. Not the simply cheddar shas, did you
Today's Holiness talked about we should have strength of mind. We should generate strength of mind. But Geshe-la feels that he's misunderstood what His Holiness said. He heard that we shouldn't have too much determination, too much strength of mind. Geshe-la said he may have gotten confused about what His Holiness said, but that's what he heard. So why is that? So why is why he perceives, why does he hear His Holiness is actually saying we have too much determination, too much strength of heart? Well, because it's in this lifetime, from the moment we were born until now, Geshe-la is saying he's working for the happiness, he's working for being well in this lifetime. So something he's done since beginningless time, in every lifetime, he has basically done that. And now in this lifetime, he's reached the age of 50. And still he's working very hard for this type of happiness. So that's too much determination, too much strength of heart to work for this ordinary happiness.
제산다 기제디 초니가 얘기도 타직도 나야미도 제산다 탄유에기 다외 토니 기제 시용도 다 산제 야보레스 산제 타직도 야보레스 자시 자탐바 나던지는 자시 자탐 야보레 다 괜히 매와 다 레디전 야보레 나이데 카레스나 펜토고 디루다 심지 탐제 펜토고 그러나 지바 탐제 타 심지 탐제 펜토고 원나 넘버 탐제도 펜토고 알베 산지 영원히 펜토고 알베스잖아 디라토고마 사실 내기고 산지 내기고 봐
So there are always two sides to everything. It's very difficult to be totally decisive about positive, negative, and so forth. So there are always two sides to it. So from the Prasangika, the Madhyamika Prasangika school point of view, we actually say, well, the Buddha is something positive, is something 100% positive. Why? Because we say that the Buddha has overcome any type of shortcoming, any kind of imperfection or shortcoming. And why do we say that? Or why do we say that he's free from any kind of fault? Well, because he benefits sentient beings. He engages in the ultimate kind of benefit with regard to sentient beings. So therefore, from this point of view, so from the point of view of having eliminated all afflictions or all obstructions, therefore we say that Buddha is positive. But he's not positive from the point of view of, but we cannot say that from his own side he is positive. We cannot say that the Buddha from his own side is good or positive, because some things the Buddha also harms. So we know what the Buddha harms. So what does the Buddha harm? Who or what does the Buddha harm? He harms desire. He harms anger. He harms confusion, that is ignorance. And if he actually only harmed his own anger, attachment, so forth, that would be all right. But instead of only harming his own, he harms all other sentient beings, attachment, anger, and so forth. And not only does he harm those afflictions in a kind of weak kind of way, no, by way of totally eliminating them, by totally irrevocably eliminating them together with their roots. So, for example, during initiations, you make an offering of a ritual cake to remove obstacles. And at that time, one makes offerings to the Buddha, who is said to be the enemy of obstructions or obstacles. So in this case, we talk about the Buddha as the enemy of afflictions. So therefore, from the point of view of the afflictions, we say the Buddha is harmful. The Buddha is negative, or the Buddha is harmful, so from the point of view of those negative emotions. But from the point of view of positive states of mind, positive awarenesses or beneficial awarenesses, and from the point of view of ourselves, we say the Buddha is positive, the Buddha is beneficial. Which means, therefore, that from the side of the Buddha himself, we cannot say that he from his own side objectively is positive or negative. He's positive or negative in relation to something else. So therefore, it's only relative. Being positive or negative is relative. Likewise, with respect to the Dharma, so we usually have a sense that phenomena exist decisively. They're decisively positive or negative. It seems that from their own side, objectively, they're either good or bad, etc. So from the point of view of the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, actually it's similar as before, that we cannot say it's in and of itself positive or negative. Why? Because for a person of weak mental capacity, of weak intelligence, the Dharma may actually harm this person by misunderstanding, etc. So as a cause of that, they may be reborn in the lower realms. and then the person of middling intelligence, of kind of average intelligence, well, the Dharma may not benefit them at all, they just don't understand it. And then with regard to a person of great intelligence, well, they may greatly benefit. So a vessel of the Dharma, a person who is an authentic vessel of the Dharma, well, for that person, it is extremely beneficial, it can be extremely beneficial. But the Dharma in and of itself, from its own side, is none of those. It's neither positive, negative, or neutral. So here we need to apply reasoning. We need to apply reasoning or logical reason. So from our point of view, we may say that the Dharma is best. Buddha Dharma is the best spiritual system. For us, this is the best. However, even though it's for us the best, even though for us this is the best system, but from the point of view of those who are not ready for the Dharma, as explained earlier, it can be beneficial. So from our point of view, so this explanation of phenomena not existing from their own side, it basically means phenomena do not exist from their own side, and instead they're dependently arisen, they're relative or exist independently. So here, using the Dharma as the example explains this idea, this union, those two together. On one hand, phenomena do not exist from their own side, on the other hand, they exist interdependently. This explains exactly what His Holiness usually says with regard to other spiritual systems. Why? Because the fact that phenomena, that even the Dharma, even the Buddha Dharma does not exist from its own side, enables us to understand that although for us Buddha Dharma is the best, but that is not true for other people. So therefore, if we have a sense that the Buddha Dharma in and of itself exists as the best spiritual system, there's danger that we criticize other spiritual systems, that we lose our respect for other spiritual systems. On one hand, and we may mistakenly feel that everyone has to become Buddhist because of the sense that the Dharma in and of itself exists as something positive. However, if we understand that in and of itself the Buddha Dharma is neither positive or negative, with respect to some people it can be harmful, and with respect to us it's very beneficial, that helps us to have a balanced kind of attitude. In the sense that we know from the point of view of ourselves, Buddha Dharma is the best. So therefore we make an effort to really practice the Dharma efficiently. We don't waste time, we have strong strength of mind, strong determination, and practice efficiently. So in that sense we have faith in the Dharma because we know in relation to ourselves the Dharma is beneficial. But at the same time, since we understand from the point of view of someone else who is not an appropriate and authentic vessel for the Dharma can be harmful, then from the point of view of that perception, when we see that this person who's not a ready vessel for the Dharma, that when they engage in other practices, when they practice other understand for that person that is appropriate, and that in and of itself the Dharma not being positive, that for this person, from the perspective of that person, it just is negative. So in this way, by understanding that the Dharma doesn't in and of itself exist as something positive or negative, we're able to fulfill what His Holiness usually says. Have faith for the Buddha Dharma and have respect for other religions. So therefore, if you look at verse 288 in chapter 12, verse 288, there is no other road to peace, etc. So this verse, this expresses that there is no other entryway to peace, that is to liberation, than the understanding of selflessness. And that is this here. The reason for that is that the afflictions, the root of the affliction, the root of samsara, is the misperception of reality, is the misperception of self, an awareness that grasps at a self, an awareness that grasps at true existence, which is why the only antidote to this misperception, which grasps a true existence, is the mind that understands the lack of true existence, is the awareness that realizes selflessness. And this is therefore here described as the only door, the only entryway, or the only method to peace, to the peace of liberation. So therefore, if you go to verse 196, so the verse Geshe-la described earlier, or Geshe-la explained before. So therefore, in order to attain liberation or enlightenment, the understanding of the realization of selflessness or emptiness is indispensable. From the point of view of accumulating merit and purifying negativity, it is not indispensable, since there are other methods other than reflecting and realizing emptiness, reflecting on emptiness. However, it's the most powerful method to accumulating merit, etc. And so this is why here in verse 196, line 3 and 4, they read, "The wise thus always expand their intelligence to..." They always exert themselves by way of reflecting on or contemplating emptiness.
logic 차상 슈자 도움이 되나 logic 다와 제스 디에나 logic 진짜 제스 디스테 아니면 이거 슈자 도움이 되나 주제니 시스템에는 주제지 되면은 주제체가 되면은 감스체가 뒤뒤성 총세 되나 버레스 디 제바이나 가려서 교화체만 되나 아니 디제도에 연구를 또 나상 슈도나 디지송이
So here, with regard to the following verses that follow after verse 196, so they are not difficult to understand. The meaning of those are not difficult to understand. So there's no need to explain those further. But here, the point is that the Buddha himself said that we should exert ourselves, we would make an effort in understanding emptiness. However, even if that is not possible, if in this lifetime we would find it too difficult to exert ourselves, to give ourselves to the fullest with regard to understanding emptiness, we should do a little bit. We should make a weak effort or spend little time trying to understand emptiness, trying to understand selflessness. So if one is unable to engage in this practice, in the study and contemplation of emptiness for 1 year, one should do it for a month. If one is not able to do it for a month, one should do it for a week. If one can't do this, then one should do it for a day. If one can't do it for a day, one should do it for 2 hours, or 1 hour, or half an hour, or a quarter of an hour. So basically one should do a little bit. Why? Because by engaging in a little effort, spending some time, one is able to create the causes for the future life, to make it easier to get the correct understanding in a future lifetime. So this is why the Buddha basically said that if we can't make a 100% effort, in other words, we can't totally dedicate ourselves to this practice or to this understanding of emptiness, we should at least make small effort. So then please look at verse 280. Whoever doubts what the Buddha said, etc. So this verse explains that it is difficult to understand the phenomena that are referred to as extremely hidden phenomena, such as, for example, the qualities of a Buddha. So certain hidden phenomena are difficult to understand, but by way of understanding emptiness, one is able to remove doubt with regard to those phenomena that are very hidden. So the teachings of the Buddha that has given with regard to more hidden phenomena, one is able to remove one's doubt with regard to those by gaining an understanding of emptiness. So His Holiness, as His Holiness usually says with regard to emptiness, the presentation of emptiness, from the point of view of external object, from the external view of the external environment, emptiness is in accordance with scientific explanation. And from the point of view of the internal, emptiness helps to subdue the afflictions. Likewise, by reflecting on impermanence and by reflecting upon the disadvantages of samsara, the faults of samsara, instead of going like feeling sad and upset about the faults of samsara, instead one should generates delight, because one cultivates the understanding that the root of samsara is the misperception of reality, is the grasping at true existence. And since this can be eliminated by realizing emptiness, joy is generated in the mind. So instead of being depressed with regard to the faults of samsara, one generates joy and delight. Likewise, with regard to great compassion, with regard to compassion. So when we observe, when we perceive sentient beings suffering, so sentient beings suffer because of confusion, because their mind is disturbed, so therefore they suffer. However, if they see their mistakes, if they're able if they're able to perceive their mistakes, they will be able to remove that suffering. And emptiness is a means. The understanding of emptiness is a means to fix the mistake. In other words, to overcome our mistaken attitude. And so instead of being discouraged upon seeing other sentient beings suffer, we should generate a sense of determination. I myself will do something. I will do something to help sentient beings. So in that way, one's strength of mind is increased through emptiness instead of feeling low or feeling upset about seeing sentient beings suffer. Someone once said to His Holiness that this person wants to only meditate on the mind of enlightenment. So bodhicitta, or the mind of enlightenment. And His Holiness, in response to this, said, well, how can you meditate on the mind of enlightenment without understanding enlightenment? So another person approached His Holiness, and he said that he didn't want to study Madhyamika, he didn't want to study the scriptures on emptiness, and instead he just wanted to do tantric retreats. That's all he wanted to do. And His Holiness said, well, when you meditate on all phenomena dissolve within emptiness, what are you going to do? So therefore, if one wants to meditate, if one wants to engage in these tantric practices without engaging in the meditation where everything dissolves into emptiness, well, one doesn't have to do something as difficult as these complicated tantric practices. One could just recite Om Mani Padme Hum. That's easier. And actually, from the point of view of what the mantra expresses, it expresses the entire Buddhist path. So this suffices in terms of explanation. So if you have any questions. So the question is, for things to be established, things must be conceptually imputed. But what allows us to impute things conventionally? So how can we say a pot is a pot, a pillar is a pillar, etc., when from the side of the object nothing exists? So when we talk about phenomena, not existing from their own side, but in general we can say this is a pillar, an elongated object, this is a table, this is a cushion. So those are individually different phenomena. So if we were to say that the difference between these objects, the pillar, etc., that this has nothing to do with the mind. It does not come from the awareness, but from the side of the object. They differ from each other. They're distinct from each other from the side of the object. Well, that is usually in accordance with how it appears to us. To our direct perception, it perceives that. It appears that way. So, for instance, the lower Buddhist philosophical systems, such as the Sautantrika, they would argue along those lines. They would say, if phenomena do not exist from their own side, that would contradict direct perception. So, for instance, the Mula Madhyamika Karika by Nagarjuna, he says here, he talks about particular phenomena. So he talks about being produced and disintegrating, but the same can be applied to other phenomena. So in the Mula Madhyamika Karika, it says being produced and disintegrating. Well, one can see that there's production and that there is disintegration. However, this is seen by a perception, by a direct perceiver, or by a perception which is mistaken. So it's due to the mistake of ignorance that leads to, therefore, this mistaken appearance or the mistaken perception by direct perceivers. So therefore, we are totally mistaken when we see things directly, when we hear things. All these perceptions we have, all these direct perceptions are all mistaken. These perceptions take place on account of mistakes, and there's a mistaken appearance. So Geshe-la himself, at some point, he thought this. He took this book. So take this book, for example. I can see this directly. This book, in and of itself, it's different from other phenomena. It's from the point of view of my perception, my direct perception. It is different. On second thought, when thinking again, well, when Gela looks at this book, what he actually sees is the front cover. He sees part of the cover, which is the front cover. But saying that he sees the book is actually difficult to really support, in the sense that he sees the front, but he doesn't see the back, he doesn't see the inside of the book. So it's merely saying, I see the book. But in actuality, what he sees is just a part of that. So it's very problematic to say that he sees the entire book. And in that sense, it's just designating. Saying I see the book is merely designated. But initially it seems, I see the book. Without thinking about this, without reflecting on this, there's a sense that one actually sees the actual book.
지난주에 데뷔 통고도 나의 데뷔 통고도 나가지래마도 지난주에 디마도 통요 말에 네 디마도 아니 무슨 참에 통고도 통해야지 주주가 전에 요 말에 주마주 대 통고도 올라나고 지난주에 디 통고도 나의 디 통고도 내줘.
But likewise, so all of you, if Geshe-la holds up the book, you would say, yes, we also see the book. But actually what you see and what Geshe-la sees is very different. You see the back of the book, Geshe-la sees the front of the book. So there's not anything pointable, nothing you can point at saying something that you all see in common, something that appears or that you perceive all of you in common. So everyone perceives something individually different. And we just designate we see a book.
제가 디 통화를 때네 융기초디 통화를 때네 대통신 따바로.
Therefore, by seeing one part of the book, seeing the front of the cover, the front of the book cover, then we impute I see the book. On the basis of seeing that part, we designate I see the book.
다 대통신도 진짜 뭐 출세 좀 증명도. 이 대통신도 뭐 출세 좀 증명도 하는데 또 우리집에 제나다 출세 세계적인 얘기로와 우리집에 마찬가지에 가다 이 대통신도 진짜 출세 좀 증명도.
So usually, with regard to seeing or not seeing the book, there's no sense of mistake. You don't have the thought, oh, I'm mistaken with regard to seeing the book. However, once you engage in the analysis from the point of view of the Madhyamika, so once you engage in ultimate analysis or analysis on Madhyamika, then things start to look differently. We become aware of the mistake.
대통신 출세 증명도. 대통신.
I see this book. There's no sense that you're mistaken. I see this thermos, right? What are you going to say? You see that thermos, don't you? There's a difference. Now I'm mistaken. Only I'm mistaken. I didn't say thermos. He said book. So when Geshe-la says this is a book, then it's obviously mistaken. So when he actually lifts an actual book and says you see a book, you're not mistaken with regard to the book, then we would all agree. Whereas on the other hand, when he lifts the thermos, saying you see a book, well, he's definitely mistaken. It's obvious that he's mistaken.
제가 답변은 디세고 통고도다나 딜라 아닌 네버도. 얘는 집어다 뒤전에 디세고 통고로. 딜 네버도. 제 키버지 요래 거라. 추버래 때는 따버래. 이내 따버래 따루래. 디 통화를 때는 세고 통선다나 딜 네버 요 말에. 디 통뒤전에 세고 통선다나 네버 요래 딜. 제가 민자위 키버지 남샤지 요래. 디 요래 디 말에세 민자위 남샤지 요래.
Now, Geshe-la lifted, he has a yellow book there, so Geshe-la is saying, if I say this book is yellow, well that, in terms of everyday kind of perception, yes, it's a yellow book. Whereas on the other hand, if Geshe-la lifts up the white book, and due to jaundice, he perceives it to be yellow, and says this book is yellow, while he would be mistaken in this case. So we can differentiate from the point of view of something that's actually yellow as being yellow and something that appears to be yellow due to jaundice. We can differentiate between something being a certain way and not being a certain way. But this doesn't mean that both phenomena are not merely designated. So from the point of view of being designated, being imputed, and the mistake that arises in relation to phenomena being imputed, the mistake is there in both cases. However, we can still, independent from that, we can still differentiate between phenomena. There's a difference between that which is actually yellow and that which is mistakenly appears to be yellow due to a disease. Moreover, if phenomena existed from their own side, if phenomena existed objectively, they could not depend on their parts. They could not be dependent on parts. If they had no parts, You couldn't talk about something being one or different from its parts. You couldn't talk about something being identical with something else or separate from something else. That kind of differentiation couldn't take place. So therefore, if phenomena really existed in and of themselves or objectively, then there would not be any difference between phenomena. We couldn't differentiate between phenomena. So phenomena can only be different, they can only be individually different or be distinct because they lack existence from their own side or they lack objective existence. So this particular issue is being dealt with or is explained in the Mula Madhyamika Karika in the 24th chapter. The 24th chapter presents exactly this issue. 계산 비승을 다시 이게 중요한 예거도 누가 딱 이거 좀 딱 했어. 그다음에 또 컨디션이 가스나 다 이게 중요한 이거도 좀 오래 계속 이거 좀 거의 괜찮아.
그것도 좀
So the question is, Geshe-la mentioned yesterday, if something is generated by causes and conditions, then it has to change. But why does it have to change moment to moment?
지산타 말하고 있나다 이마 충분히 다 치료치다 그런 줘도 다디 무슨 통과 다디 그런 줘야디 아니 가장 봐도 남자 대림 학대가 이렇게 멋있게 말로
So Geshe-la took himself as an example. So himself from a small child until now has changed. So he looked very different when he was small, and now he's become an older person. So if things didn't change moment by moment, it would be like nothing changed for a long time, and suddenly there would be a sudden change.
지산타 디지디자는 로레레 그거 저희 토안에 신의 니시디 중간. 로레레디에 아니 딸이 당보거든 그 로사도스 때마다 탁스 그를 이래 말아. 다와레레를 들고 이마 대도나 아니 이마레레를 줄 치즈레레를 줄 가세레레를 줄 왕기 신의 그걸 아버지 어제 통투에 남샤디 시도거를 마도 이지레레는 그러면은 아니 가세레레를 그러면은 까마레레를 그려 말에 디면은 치즈레레를 그려 말에 아니 이마레레를 그려 말에 다와레레를 그려 말에 아니 그러와 디남샤디 용담을 요 말에
So therefore there's change from year to year. However, it's not like one day before the new year, suddenly there's a change. So instead, there's no this kind of jump, this kind of sudden change is impossible. On the other hand, what happens is on a monthly basis there's change. But this monthly change is only possible since there's change on a daily basis, since there's change from hour to hour, from second to second. And this subtle change that takes place within each moment enables us to perceive the coarse kind of change. So therefore, it's this very subtle change, which then is like a change from second to second, minute to minute, day to day, month to month, and so forth, which then makes it possible for us to observe coarse kinds of change.
제도제면도 기본 시다. 그냥 도체 간다 따인데 아니 그게 기지를 봐. 교주고 요거니. 그게 아니 뒤에 타버도 치실기 토네 빠잖아. 따야도 쓰고. 봐. 진지비기 다시 제가 다시 쉬어 다가나 치실 주지 빠졌지. 도체이 토네. 제대로 되지. 근데 여러분 치실랑 다시 된지지요. 같이 구조자 등이 좀 주세요. 구조자에디 가르스나 개가지고 알았으면 왜서. 가 지사다 둘처럼 데 온데잖아. 딱 교줘야지. 디 인데잖아. 라바도 맞죠래라면 다 라바도 둘처럼 된신 셰우지로. 된신도 매바지 라바 통대에 강의바디 둘처럼 되달라 때네 따버스미나 다 처모디 교 라고 돼 버줄 없어 버려 말어. 진짜 다가라기 다 치우고 되게 수진 뭐고 되게 참 기지 두기여 버디 다 이게 다 주고.
So nowadays, scientists are able, from the point of view, or able to perceive the kind of momentary change. If, on the other hand, we were to say that a coarse phenomenon that we can perceive, that is made of subtle atoms, if that were to change, but the subtle atoms don't change, then the object would exist as separate from the atoms. If the basis on which the coarse object is based, the subtle atoms didn't change, but the object did change, they would have to be different. But phenomena, coarse coarser types of phenomena, they're imputed on the basis of the subtle atoms, on the basis of particles. So those physical objects are merely imputed on that basis. And therefore we say they change because their basis of imputation, that on which they're based, the subtle atoms, they're changing. And since the change takes place in each moment, we talk about momentary change.
직접 저는 주도고 제 시스템 무의식 하나 개와 탐지 무의식 마찰이 있고 무의식 가서 무의식 말을 가서
무의식과
나 아니 제가 손이 직접 제가 손이 对象有的给就是因为讲给我对象因为给我康天的主导继续你存在是the question there are two questions one is what are the five super knowledges in verse mentioned in verse 117. And then can you please explain verse number 133 and give examples?
당연히 무엇인가 되잖아. 아니 하이미 무엇이 미기 무엇이 나위 무엇이 아니 제 무엇이 같이 신생시 무엇이 오늘 지진이 무엇이 아니 사세 무엇이 안 주지 말 무엇이 말하나다 어디.
So when we talk about the five types of clairvoyance, to just cite them, so there's the divine, there's the clairvoyance of the divine eye here. So here is called super knowledge, but another term that is used in English is clairvoyance. So the super knowledge of the clairvoyance of the divine eye, the visual kind of the visual clairvoyance. The clairvoyance, the audio clairvoyance, the clairvoyance of knowing another person's mind, and the clairvoyance of knowing a previous life. So, from a tantric point of view, or in the tantric scriptures, you talk about a clairvoyance from the point of view of taste or of tangibility, but they're not mentioned in the sutric text.
도루를 쉐디 어쨌든 장디는 테스트도 여기 자디 타는 거는 디체도 엔 수디 타는 통해도 지마다 어디 네 지지 다해도.
So the sutric explanation, the explanation of the different clairvoyances or super knowledges, that corresponds to the sense of the visual sense objects that we can send back and forth. So it's possible to send shape, visual objects, we can send those back and forth. We can send sound back and forth, but it's impossible to send back and forth smell or taste. So you can't send an email or something sending taste or smell, but you can do that with sound and visual objects.
되게 뒤송송 봐. 되샤디 아니 교환을 봐셔이 또기 아니 조 넣으시러 왔다. 또기 깨딩이 지당 책이 깨는데 교환이 외에 나오는데 아니 그게 책이 깨는데 깨디 아니 가이드 라버스.
So with regard to verse 133, here says desire arises from causes and it also arises through circumstance. So Solness explained the meaning of this verse. Solness explained that we talk about desire that arises as a result of imprints from a previous life, as a habit, as a kind of a habit for having desire with regard to certain objects, which comes from a previous life. And then we talk about, where Solness explained a second type, which is desire that arises in dependence on certain conditions or circumstances within this lifetime. So the second type, which is not a type that arises through habit, is easier to overcome. It arises merely in dependence on circumstances.
샤바 딜러버 슈칭 제베이나 남이 자완이 매버치 다바이요 이니 그 공시디 타데요 공시디기 아니 교와체마야 미모디 또보게 우르와 교와체마레 야 세메다레 사니나니레 아니 미모디 게데다 줘야노 내가 저자리야 디바디 니마디 다사네 양조사라 뜻이 두자시고도 공시디.
So, for instance, when we accumulate a non-virtue, when we engage in a negative action, we are able to purify the karmic seed, the negative seed that was left, or the negative imprint. We're able to purify that. And depending on the strength of that purification, we can totally purify that karmic imprint to such a degree that we do not have any negative experience with regard to that negative action. There's no resultant negative experience. However, the habit, the kind of habit of engaging in that negative action, that remains with us. And this kind of habit with a negative action, that could arise, or that could become manifest in the next life, but it can also become manifest towards the end of one's life, tomorrow or the day after. So this is really negative, the kind of habit. When we engage in negativity, although the negative kind of karmic seed, that can be purified, the habit continues on. And the problem with that is that although we've purified the negative karma, we again and again engage in the same action due to the habit. But looking at it from a positive perspective, if one accumulates a virtuous action, one benefits another person, for instance, and gets angry immediately after that, so getting angry with this person and generating regret with regard to the positive action one is previously engaged in, well then the positive seed that was planted, that is gone. However, not everything is lost, because the habit that has started to form by engaging in a beneficial action, that remains with us. So it remains with us such that we're more likely to engage in a more positive action again in the future, and then thereafter again and again. So we don't lose everything by getting angry, totally eliminating, depending on the strength of the anger, possibly totally eliminating the positive seed, but the habit remains with us. So knowing that, usually we say, well, be careful when you do something positive, when you give something to someone, do not generate regret, because otherwise the positive kind of karma, the positive seed is lost. But actually now understanding what Geshe-la just explained, well, whatever, I get regret or not, I still have some benefit. I'm still left with a habit. Furthermore, not only if one has generated regret, so when one generates regret, of course one's own virtue is gone, but one has still helped another person. So it's not like you help a sick person, you help a patient, you help a poor person, that after regret they become sick again. No, you've actually benefited them. So the benefit that you've given to that person, that remains with them. Otherwise, when you have regret, you should have regret because you have regret. So here the question is with regard to this morning, His Holiness gave the explanation of Gyaltsabje saying in his commentary that interdependence and emptiness are an object of one mind. When one is perceived directly, the other is perceived indirectly. But then His Holiness refuted that by citing a few, giving a few quotations. So one of the quotations here mentions, for example, that interdependence and emptiness are not object and object possessor. They're not a direct or indirect object of one mind. And Geshe also just added that although we say independence on interdependence, we realize emptiness, that does not mean that one is the definition of the other, that one is the definiendum and the other is the definition. Also, it does not mean when you explicitly realize one, when you explicitly realize either interdependence, dependent arising or emptiness, that you realize the other implicitly with that same mind. Usually we say, since something exists in dependence, since phenomena depend on their parts, etc., therefore they have to exist inherently. And if they do not exist inherently, well then they cannot perform a function. There's no possibility of an agent, an action, etc. So some people would say, with regard to the table, if there's not something to point at, not something really pointable, something essential there, nothing existing from its own side, you couldn't say that this table has arisen in dependence on other causes and conditions. You couldn't say that this table is smaller in relation to something bigger, or bigger in relation to something smaller. So this is the argument of some people who would say that unless it exists inherently, it cannot depend on something other than itself. So some people say, for instance, if you don't stand on your own feet, how can you help others? So this is similar, this idea is similar, unless you stand on your own feet, how can you actually benefit others? So likewise, unless something exists in and of itself or from its own side, how can it depend on others, or how can other phenomena depend on it?
That 주도 공항이 다 편진 때에서 이제 코란에 다 정화시고 디 매딩이 찔레 정화 매딩이 이는 편진 때에 저 제투베지 다디 타녀를 용되기도 하던데
From the point of
저랑게 짜마도 네 짜마도 만인념도 짜투베지 용되고
From the point of view of the higher schools, from the point of view of the higher philosophical schools, they talk about phenomena depending on each other. There's an interdependence. One phenomena depends on the other, and the other depends on the one. So even though neither of them exist independently, neither of them exist in and of themselves, they nonetheless they depend on one another. So this is similar to saying, I cannot lift the table, someone else cannot lift the table, but we can lift it together.
다 간드레도 진이 시비 된다도 장비 떡이 아니 다기디 도초차 땡제제 시륜의 디 슈기 굉장히 신다 상담 먹어야 되는 라문에 봤다다 하기 때라도 셈이 젠통이지.
So as explained before, in the 24th chapter of the Mula Madhyamika Karika, it explains exactly that. First you understand interdependence. Once you have an understanding of interdependence or dependent arising, then automatically you will be able to understand the lack of inherent existence. Without giving it much effort, without really exerting yourself, you will be able to realize emptiness. Likewise, since phenomena do not exist from their own side, since they do not exist objectively, therefore they must exist interdependently. So it goes both ways. So usually with regard to applying the verbal conventions, we talk about understanding that phenomena are not non-existent. We understand they do not exist inherently. By understanding that phenomena appear, we understand that they lack inherent existence. And by understanding that they exist interdependently or conventionally, we know that we overcome the extreme of nihilism, that they don't exist at all. That's usually how we look at it. But here in this case, it's the other way around. By understanding the lack of inherent existence of phenomena, we overcome the extreme of nihilism. And by understanding the appearance of phenomena, we understand that they exist interdependently. So if those are complete, if by way of these two ways, in those two ways, one is able to understand interdependence and emptiness, one gains a complete understanding of emptiness.
Shen dewa dewe changzi me na taba pasho corona dewa me junju so sunga dan dena niram jajunga so dewa me.
So the question here is, if one does not have the love and compassion that wishes for the benefit of other sentient beings, then forget about liberation. There won't even be any happiness in samsara. So this is from this person here cited the Bodhisattva Way of Life by Shantideva. So therefore the question here is, if unless one has the love and compassion that wishes to benefit all sentient beings, unless one has that, there's no happiness. Well, how do hearers and solitary realizers have happiness once they attain liberation? So the person who asked this question may have mistaken love and compassion as opposed to great love and great compassion.
디지털 가르쳐서는 얘랑이 교도 잡지춘이면은 아니 근데 다주말하는 되기로 잡지춘이면은 lungi를 차르래 다주말 lungi를 지용말 콘서트지.
Why? Because if hearers and solitary realizers do not have love and compassion, do not have kind-heartedness, well, they'll be very angry kind of people. They will be totally governed by their own anger.
인도기 중앙으로데 파인 인도기 디 타바토베치도 아니 수수 타바토베치도 냠렌치용도 있잖아요. 아니 타바토베기 유모가 니부터에 시험. 그래 당고 추중기지 시험돼. 추중하게 남다 수야다 유모를 같이 잡고 유모를 같이 자야지도 되샤니 분도 봐. 시당이 냠을 잡아고 봐. 두상 시고. 인도 중앙의 시고.
So, for instance, in the scriptures, for hero practitioners, for example, it is clearly explained that in order to attain liberation, one needs to overcome the obstacles of afflictions. So, by engaging in ethical conduct, etc., it's important to overcome the afflictions and initially weaken those afflictions. So, the way to overcome desire, in order to the way to overcome attachment and desire is by reflecting upon the negative aspects of the phenomenon, whereas in order to overcome, that is to weaken anger, one needs to meditate on love and compassion. So this is what is clearly expounded in those scriptures for hero practitioners. In particular, all of us have natural love. We all have naturally some degree of love and compassion. But if those hero and solitary realizers were to not have any love and compassion, that would mean once they enter the path, they lose this natural love and compassion. So that's impossible. Sometimes also when we hear about practitioners from the Theravada, from the Hinayana or the Theravada tradition, it seems as if followers like hearers and solitary realizers have less love and compassion than ourselves. But that is totally mistaken, because in actuality, those practitioners have 100 times, 1,000 times more love and compassion for others. In particular, Hira and solitary realizer, arhats or photospheres, those who have attained the peace of nirvana. So those beings, they have totally eliminated, they have totally abandoned anger. Furthermore, from the point of view of perceiving self and others as equal, so from the point of view of understanding the lack of objective existence of oneself and others, that realization they have attained. So they understand there's this special force with regard to the realization of understanding that just as we lack inherent existence, we lack objective existence, so do all other sentient beings. So with regard to that, they've attained a special type of understanding with respect to entities. So then, if they have such love, if they have such compassion, the question that may arise is, well, why are they not bodhisattvas? Why do we not say they're bodhisattvas? The difference is, or the reason for why they're not bodhisattvas is because they don't have love and compassion that is focused on all sentient beings. That has they do not have the aspiration that as long as space endures, as long as space endures, until each sentient being has been liberated, I will remain. So that kind of strength of mind, that kind of determination, these heroes and solitary realizers do not have.
이라는 가르치는 마티를 제시를
So when we read the Bodhisattva way of life, we may have a bit of we ourselves may feel, oh, I want to be enlightened, I want to be there for sentient beings. Oh, it's so easy for me to have that kind of wish. So why does it not arise in the continuum of those heroes in solitude realizers? So that kind of question may arise.
그래서는 변화하고 참선 상담 거 참선 상담 오늘 심지 탐지 뱀도 심지 탐지 genki 심취시계도
For example, Geshe-la himself, he says, sometimes I think about these ideas, these issues, and sometimes at that time I have a sense, yes, I want to benefit all sentient beings. I want to take personal responsibility for all sentient beings.
근데 기준이거든 상담 다래 뭐라 건지 미 가져요 뒤참에 개인이 키다도 키투자 말이죠 다 다르네 이게 심지 탐지에 뭐라 건지 미래 누구다
So, but then in the next moment, if I think about all the people in the cloud ganj, taking responsibility for all them, oh no, that's not possible, that's too much. So it seems that all sentient beings are less than all the people or all the living beings in the cloud ganj.
지시다 반대로 것도 심지 그것도 비스 너지 커머 찾아 심지 분들이 이땅 투자 말을 그 뒤고 다시
So I will take responsibility for all sentient beings. I will work for their benefit. But for all of those in McLeod, I cannot really take responsibility. Well, that just doesn't work. That's definitely a contradiction.
이 가림 같은 거에서는 아주 도뒤지 심지 탐지에 색지 도스로 자셔야 돼. 아직 지금 여기에 서로지. 다음에 요거는 레전드 참 이게 동의 탐지 셀 디 탐지 또 정말이나 힘이 심지 탐지 시디 아니 뭐네디 타게 다다들 레이브로
So the problem is that usually when we think about all sentient beings or reflect upon bodhicitta and so forth, we just very briefly take to mind all sentient beings, and there's a sense, oh, that's possible, I can do that. But really, that is not sufficient. That way of familiarizing oneself is not sufficient. One needs to think of each and every person, or one should take to mind individual person, this person, and this person, and that person, and that person. And in all cases, I will take away all their suffering, this particular person. I will take away all of his or her suffering. I will bring about all of his or her happiness. I myself will bring this about. So only by way of familiarizing oneself in that way repeatedly will one get a correct, was able to generate a correct training with regard to bodhicitta, etc.
대중이 조당문에 제외는 다 먼저 처음에 이미 가진 먼저 세팅에 독샷이 됐어요. 막아서 디다 아니 수준은 신기 제어지 맞게 버도 산지에 저어져요.
That's it. So from a Mahayana point of view, the way the Mahayana works or Mahayana practice works is that a sentient being, a person that one doesn't dislike, that one dislikes from the depth of one's heart, one needs to consider equally important to oneself. One needs to consider that person's happiness to be equally important to one's own happiness. Unless one does that, one's practice will not be effective.
아버지 전주선에 도시 상인들이 또 지긴선 계량사로 나다진이 나한테 저랑하러 가보지는 마지를 나와래서 나 저랑하러 가보지 마지 나와요 맞다고 지금 갑자기 사러 이거 지지다
In particular with regard to having taken the Bodhisattva vow, so thereafter one has given, with the Bodhisattva vow, one has given the promise, one has given an oath, if you like, that one does this for all sentient beings. So in other words, whether other sentient beings love oneself, like oneself or not, it's up to them. They have the freedom. I don't have that freedom. Having taken the Bodhisattva vow, we no longer have that freedom to dislike others.
전주 선배지라 오늘 나와 이렇게 된 거다. 나 저랑나 가르쳐 마지 마라 나와래서 저랑 만날 때 야고 맞지라 저랬어. 저렇게 된 사이 봐서 세계 전주 선배든지 제가 수지 탐지에도 지금 스티나가 수요로서나 오늘 레레서
So for a bodhisattva, they would actually agree with this. If you were to tell them, well, I can do whatever I want. I can like sentient beings or not like sentient beings. Bodhisattvas do not have that freedom. They do not have the freedom. They have to work for the benefit of all sentient beings. And since you're a bodhisattva, you have to do the same. And this bodhisattva would go, yes, you're right.
지게지 군제 디슈도 rajung mabutu ani rajung kashi cheba mibutu charang tado yabo chigi midus di shidi zan kundi chenja sikida une jida shibu jinnan ko aro kundi labje japsa labje jabta labjung tsusa labjung zuki jinnan ko yoade tandale migi tiri laro disari ani chenja sikida kundi.
So once a foreign person said to His Holiness that His Holiness has given ordination to so many people, there are so many monks and nuns, and there are so many who misbehave. So His Holiness has not looked after them well. So His Holiness, in response to that criticism, His Holiness started shedding tears. So even though His Holiness really looks after the monastics in a very profound way by giving them advice, etc., nonetheless His Holiness took it to heart in such a way that it brought tears to his eyes. If it was us, we would just say, mind your own business.
the preview the Sangye So could you please expand and explain verse 153 and the free will concept? And I just asked Kishila also is another question from another person which says, does the Buddha possess free will?
That the Chanchu Senpa, Changsang Tong Tong Tsengi Yin Che Da, and Tanda Newon Bang Yo, the Newon Wong to Chuba, this Newon Wong to Majori Tone, Ron Yu Tone, Siva the Kiva and Sunko. That did the Q Ron Yu Tone, Kie Yore, that Kie the Ron Yu Tone in that, Pagitone, that Kache, that's some Ron Yu Tone Cheji, Sunko.
It is explained that bodhisattvas who have attained the Mahayana path of seeing onwards, for those who have attained the Mahayana path of seeing and above, they have control over their afflictions. And since they have control over their afflictions, they have control over where they're reborn, so they can control the state of rebirth. And if they have control over where they're reborn, well, implied in that is that they also have control over their own death.
디제비자네 제자는 용어 말에 되샤 요 말에 이내 되바 또바 이미기 다 되바지 단달에 요리.
So even though they have no longer affliction, so there's no desire, there's no anger, attachment, etc., but there's still a wish, there's still a kind of a wish for something. A conceptual mind that is a wish for something, a wishy kind of a way.
다 딘지의 자리 또바 요바다 또바디 군의 동지기 다 시지다 딘지 요비 차네 단달에 정원에 미쳐 처음지 단달에 요레스 자세바바 디 단달에 디스.
So again, Tenzabak suggests to use the word desire, so they even have some type of desire here, but it's not the kind of afflicted, it's not the type of afflicted desire that arose previously. So this means that there is still this kind of desire, though it's not really an affected desire, but it is still affected by the misperception of reality. In other words, it's still affected by cognitive obscurations. So in that way, there's still a lack of freedom. There's still not an actual freedom. There's still lacking a type of freedom here, having this desire which is affected by cognitive obscurations. However, once one attains the state of a Buddha, then this subtle state of a lack of freedom has been totally abandoned, it's totally overcome. So the Buddha has attained the complete state of freedom. So someone who doesn't know the Four Noble Truth well, it's difficult to understand this particular issue. However, if someone has gained a good understanding of the Four Noble Truth, then this issue is addressed in Maitreya Uttara Tantra.
never change it. never change it.
So here, this is with regard to an earlier question, with regard to an earlier explanation Geshe-la gave. So Geshe-la said early on that a person of weaker mental capacity, upon listening to the Buddha Dharma or receiving teachings on the Buddha Dharma, it may harm this person to such a degree that they may be reborn in the lower realms. So could Geshe-la please clarify this point?
Chirubi Tawalo Koboy Milanati, Yamakalan Ken, Kantaria, and when they may send it, I say which in Passon do. Any Denjer and Winnie Mess, Sanjay and Winnie May, Tarbar and Winnie Mess, this one do, and Winnie May between the Mebala, Kotroche. And when they made you say the Kalashi Shadra, Lola did you do that? And when they may between the Mabel, Dula Passon and do something, that never thing to do, may like to do, di pese diabo medu, lama diabo medu, lenje me lagu du, kiawa ngasi me lagu du sen, mahawa chin kruata, tinjigi niya, yesuno treji yonde ko.
So, with regard to receiving the explanation of the lack of objective existence, so when someone receives an explanation on emptiness, well, basically the explanation entails the fact that the law of cause and effect doesn't exist objectively or inherently. A Buddha himself doesn't exist inherently or objectively. Liberation doesn't exist objectively and inherently. So, to someone who's not ready, whose mind is not ready, what they may understand is that phenomena do not exist at all. They may misunderstand, thinking that it means nothing exists. So, therefore, of course, it's difficult to differentiate between not existing inherently and not existing at all. To differentiate between those two is difficult. But someone who's not ready for receiving those kind of teachings, they may generate or cultivate the wrong view that the Dharma is not good, that the Lamas are not good, the Lamas who give those teachings, they're of no use, etc. Because they talk about the law of cause and effect, or the law of karma not existing, liberation not existing, etc. So due to this misunderstanding, they may put down the Dharma and in this way accumulate, or dependent on that, accumulate great non-virtue. So some people may initially listen well and see perceive the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, the teachings, etc. as something positive, and at the very end they start criticizing it, saying, "Oh, that doesn't make any sense. This is all useless." So then others maybe they have faith in the Buddha Dharma, they may have faith in the teachings, in the perfection of wisdom sutras, etc., in the Lama, and initially start off with great faith in the teachings. And then upon receiving the teachings on the lack of inherent existence, they're unable to differentiate between not existing inherently and not existing at all. And then the misperception arises that, well, if the law of cause and effect, the law of karma doesn't exist inherently, it means it doesn't exist. So my actions will not have consequences. So I can just do whatever I want. And there's also the misperception of them having a high kind of realization. They perceive themselves as having high spiritual realizations and engage in all sorts of negative Then there's another group of people who would apply reasoning, who would apply the ultimate reasoning, or the reasonings that pertain to emptiness. And upon analyzing or examining an object, they come to understand that the object cannot be found when engaging in that kind of analysis. But then at the same time, they also know that if they say there's nothing there, they denigrate the Dharma, they kind of fall into the extreme of nihilism. So instead they decide, I'm not going to take anything to mind, whether existence nor non-existence. So all they do is engage in a meditation on nothingness. So therefore, since they are unable to differentiate between something existing and something existing inherently, so they're unable to distinguish those two, so then therefore they perceive love and compassion to be a self-grasping kind of awareness. Faith is a self-grasping awareness. Bodhicitta is a self-grasping awareness, etc. And since they understand that the self-grasping awareness needs to be abandoned, needs to be overcome, they do not engage in the practice of love, compassion, etc. So for that person, it is impossible at the same time to overcome the misperception of reality, the grasping at true existence, and to also engage in the practice of love and compassion. This person would be unable to do both. So only someone who understands, although phenomena do not exist inherently, they nonetheless exist. So only when that understanding has been obtained, that person can then meditate together on the wisdom realizing emptiness, and at the same time on love, compassion, bodhicitta. So let's leave it here for today. So there won't be. So Vincent was saying sorry for all your unanswered questions, and Yeshua said there won't be any review class tomorrow.